We're a community radio station based in Cambuslang and Rutherglen, and what we do is we broadcast within that area, and it's completely run by volunteers. What I'm involved in, I'm a presenter there. I also do some of the training, so like podcast training, learning how to use the operating equipment and things like that. So I'm also a third year media student at the University of the West of Scotland, where I'm engaged with loads of different projects on new media and the like. And I'm also a podcaster, as you see there in inverted brackets there. Indigo, that was a new music podcast I created back in 2009. And what that was originally was a 1 hour long podcast which featured music from the likes of local bands and artists within Glasgow. So the next one was the media debate, and that was only a pilot because we didn't really get that off the ground. There was loads of reasons why we didn't get it off the ground, because it was a student debate really on how media was. So obviously we've had loads going on this year with News of the World and whatever. And during recording this pilot, we just felt that the audience wasn't there to just listen to like three students discussing media concepts and stuff. So Sound City 11 was a conference and festival that took place in May this year. And I went down with a team from City of Glasgow College to record and podcast the entire sessions from that. Technically that wasn't a podcast because we used SoundCloud and applications to do that. And of course the Social Media Week Glasgow podcast, and there's still loads of great content that come from that. Oops. Cool. So podcasting, basically a podcast is a series of audio files released regularly via web syndication, RSS. So that could be daily, weekly, whatever, monthly podcasts. So what can podcasts offer us? We can use them to find out news stories. Recently with the English riots as well, that was a fantastic example, especially citizen media and journalists, which I'll focus more on later on in this presentation. We can also use it to hear about comedy and stuff. So for example, recently the Edinburgh Comedy Festival took place, and a lot of that was podcasted for free via iTunes and services like SoundCloud. Audio guides as well, we can also use podcasts in this element. For example, if you were going to a museum or whatever and you wanted to download a free audio tour guide, you could do that through iTunes as well. And of course, learning and teaching, it's a great way to share like presentations and the audio from lectures and stuff like that for students and teaching engagement. And as well, common interests, hobbies. You can create a podcast, something you're interested in. So for example, a few years ago, I was an avid fan of the TV show Lost, so I used to subscribe to all the like geeky podcasts. And of course, catch up on the best bits. So for example, the Chris Moyles podcast, that's the best bits from his show throughout the week. And we did a similar thing at Cam Glen Radio, podcasting key interviews from like local community groups and what have you. So podcasting how-to, getting started. What I recommend is listen to other shows and get a flavour of what people are talking about and just come up with ideas that are interesting and original. Podcast something that currently isn't, so it could be something that's local to you, the area you stay in. And then a really good example of that is a fellow student at University of West of Scotland produces a podcast called the Millport Podcast, and that's really good, putting a local element on the island, and it's a way of communication as well and hearing about local news and stuff. Plan ahead, write down ideas before recording. Bullet points are really good, so you just key things you want to mention within your podcast, just bullet point them on like a sheet of paper. Rehearse, but what I would say is don't over rehearse, because then it just sounds like you're reading off a script, and it's heavily scripted when you don't want it to sound that bad. See what works and what doesn't work, because that's the best way. to get content for your podcast. As well, set a time limit. So whenever you're releasing a podcast, whether it's weekly, daily, just set it to 30 minutes so the listener knows what to expect, basically. And think about the type of content you wish to include, whether that's music, vox pops, interviews, and remember, content is king. So this is some of the hardware you can use for recording podcasts. So this is a picture of one of the studios we have at Camglen Radio, and that's the desk there. So that's what we use to record some of our extra output. As well, you can use mobile phones. So this is an application called iPadio, and it's really handy for recording podcasts and just audio bites straight from your phone, especially if you don't have any equipment with you. You can also use portable audio recording devices. So this is an example of what I use. This is a Zoom H4n handy recorder, and that's what I do most of my podcasting on. You can also use a computer. You can use your internal or external mic to record, as you see this guy is doing here. So techniques, record in a good environment, acoustic-wise, so don't be recording in like a kitchen or a bathroom where it's just going to be too echoey. Record in an office space or a living room where there's like curtains and carpets and stuff, so it's not too bad. But as well as recording in an environment, say if you were recording in like the woods or whatever for whatever purpose, it's good to have some extra sounds so it just creates like a nice atmosphere. So for example, I recorded a couple of vox pops earlier in this year in a pub, just asking people what they thought about like the general election which happened. So yeah, speak clearly and loud, not too loud. Obviously keep quite a distance away from the microphone so it doesn't distort. And if you're interviewing someone, make them feel comfortable because the interview will just sound a lot better. Feedback is essential. Get feedback from colleagues, friends, family, because they can tell you the direction you need to get your podcast in the way. And of course, know your audience, know who it is that you want to target, and get them subscribing to your podcast. So editing. What this is going to be me talking about Audacity, and the reason I'm going to focus on Audacity is you can download it for free on Windows, Linux and Mac. This isn't the software I use. I use a paid for software by Adobe, but this is just equally as effective. So if you just go to the website, you'll be greeted by this page where you can download the software. And then what you will need to do is download the lame MP3 encoder, because that isn't included in the package. Cool. Right, so as you see here, this is the interface of Audacity, which I recorded yesterday. And up here, probably just over here, this is the record button. Around here as well, as you probably can't really see, but this is where you select the microphone input, so whether you're using an internal or an external microphone. And here as well, always select stereo because it sounds a lot better. Cool. Cool, so what I'm doing here, I'm recording basically a short introduction to a podcast. So what I'm saying is, welcome along to this Camglen Radio podcast. To find out more about us and our services, please visit www.camglenradio.org. Cool. So once you're happy with the recording, and of course you can monitor the levels up here. And there's a wave formation there. So what I've decided to do here is go to effects, and there's a setting called normalize, and it's already been preset where you can add or increase the decibels to the sound if you like. So what that does is that normalizes the level. So say for example, if I was recording in an environment where my voice was too low or too loud. So as you see, what that's done there, it's increased the levels where perhaps my voice has been too quiet. So yeah. There's also loads of other great effects that you can use in this. You can also increase like the bass on your voice. It's good as well for, there's an option down here called noise removal. And what that does is, say if you were in like a noisy environment, so I was talking about the example in the pub, say if it was too loud and there was too many people chattering in the corner and you had like glasses hitting off one another and stuff like that, what you're able to do is you could select this bit here as a like a test area, and then what that does is that then removes everything else from the audio. But I feel with using programs like this, it's best to just find your own way with them, because there's more than one way of doing everything you're seeing here. So what I'm doing here, I'm just listening back to the audio, so I'm more than pleased with it. So what you then go to do is you go and save it, and what it'll do, it'll bring up a kind of index where you have to add like the artist, the title of the episode. You can add album artwork, for example, and I would always add as much information as you can to the podcast, which I'm about to show now. I forgot to mention as well, as you see there, I was only using one of the multi-track interface, but what you could also do is say, so for example, if my voice was in this part here, I could add an instrumental music bed if I wanted to, and then add it here, and then using tools like this one, it's like a pen, and what you can do is you can just add dots along here and then just fade in and then fade up if you want to. But as I said, it's all about trying it for yourself and just experimenting, because there's more than one way to do it. Right, so that was an example. So I was speaking about tagging, and the BBC are really good with tagging their podcasts and stuff. Last FM, it's mainly a music site that gives you recommendations for things to listen to. But this can give you an indication of how many people are listening to your podcast, and get feedback and stuff like that as well. And it's something we use at Cam Glen, only we don't have millions of listeners. So hosting your podcast, it's completely free. This is one of the services I use. This is called Podomatic, and literally it takes a minute to sign up. It's so easy to do. Another service is podbean.com. Don't worry if you don't get all these addresses, because they'll be up at the end of the presentation. And listing in iTunes, add your podcast to the iTunes directory, and every podcast is listed there. So for example, a few years ago, if you just typed in Glasgow, Lemmy, who does the comedy show on BBC Scotland, that was originally a podcast which he started up, and then now it's a TV show. So yeah, but an iTunes account is required to add a podcast. But when you're doing that, what you're required to do is to copy the RSS feed. So if you're using Podomatic, Podbean, they'll generate this RSS code for you, and you'll just copy and paste into the iTunes browser. So podcasting, we can do this through our mobile phones as well, our smartphones, using services like Audioboo and iPadio. Audioboo is a really good program, I find, using it on my phone. It's limited to 5 minutes, so it's not going to consume loads of 3G and your data plan. Plus, with it being limited to 5 minutes, I think you can be very creative in filling that with content. iPadio is a similar service, but what that does, that streams from, it's called phone casting. So what you do is you call a number through your smartphone and then just talk down the line or use their app. So they're both really interesting to use. And as I mentioned earlier, during the English rides, there was this really good example that I was hoping to play, and it's from Croydon, and it's just a normal everyday guy going home from work, and he's got his smartphone, and he's talking and he's describing like the chaos he can see around him. So if you're on Audioboo, just search for that because it's a really compelling piece of audio. So resources there. So there's everything I've talked about. CCMixter. That's a really good website if you're after like sound bites, instrumental music to add to your audio features. And as well, with that, it's all royalty free, so you don't need to pay PRS, PPL and stuff like that. And also the people that have uploaded their work, it's all done through Creative Commons. So yeah, cool. So does anyone have any questions? Questions about podcasting? Anyone? I mean, if there's anything you want me to go more into in a bit more depth, I'm more than happy to. Yeah. Well, if you don't want to chat now, I'll be about, and then you can just ask me some further questions. So thank you for your time, and I hope you've been able to take something out of this. And let me know how you get on. There's my email address, so if you need any more advice or whatever, and I'll be more than happy to respond. So thank you very much for coming along today, and I really appreciate it. Thanks.